Hi everyone! Welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing part 2 of reacting to your unpopular bookish opinions. So I will link part 1 of this video down below. When I had asked in my community post about give me your unpopular opinions about books, you all had so many comments on that post, which I was so grateful for. And it was so much fun reacting to some of them, but I didn't get to nearly all of them. And I have so many more that I have not read or reacted to yet. And you all definitely wanted to see a part 2. So here it is. I'm going to try to react to them a little bit quicker this time to try and get through as many as I possibly can. And we're going to go through truly, like I would love to get to all of them. There's like 90 of them here, so I don't know if that's realistic, but we're going to get through as many as we possibly can together. So I'm just going to stop talking and we're going to start reacting. I absolutely hated Verity, even though I've heard lots of people raving about it. The premise was interesting, but I couldn't root for the main character at all, and rather than a thriller, it turned more into a graphic erotic novel when it didn't need to be. I also really disliked the ending. I, unfortunately, have not read Verity, so I don't have a very fun reaction to this opinion. I've heard so much about it. I do want to read it just because it is so polarizing. I would love to see, you know, which side of the debate I would be on, but I've heard people say that same thing about Verity, that they really hate it. So I feel like you are definitely not alone, and there were a lot of likes on that comment. I prefer reading my Kindle over physical books, like to the point where if I want to reread something I already physically own, I seriously debate buying the e-copy instead. Interesting. I mean, I think that that is great for space. I wish I loved reading from a Kindle as much as I love reading from physical books. I think my problem with reading from a Kindle is I love being able to visually see how far along I am in a book, and only having like the percentage thing at the bottom of the Kindle, I just feel like I'm reading for so much longer and not making as much progress in a ebook than I am in a physical book. I love physically turning the pages and feeling that progress. I enjoyed The Fourth Wing, even though I could see its flaws, and was wary of its instant popularity. Okay, I've been convinced to read The Fourth Wing. I was not going to read it, and I still probably won't read it for a while, but I am so convinced. I'm so curious at this point. I mean, everyone is talking about it. Everyone. I can't go anywhere without seeing someone talk about Fourth Wing. So I'm just so curious at this point why this particular book is so hyped. So I definitely want to read it. Fantasy audiobooks are impossible to absorb. Now, for me, I agree. I cannot listen to fantasy audiobooks and absorb what's going on. I get way too confused, all the names, all the places. Maybe if it's a reread, I can do that. Or maybe if it's a sequel to a book, I can potentially do that. But even then, I have a really hard time. So I actually don't listen to fantasy books really at all on audio. Anytime I'm listening to audiobooks, it's a thriller, it's a contemporary, it's a historical fiction, it's anything else except for fantasy. So I don't get through as many fantasy books because of that. But I agree with you. Now, a lot of other people can listen to fantasy books with no problem, but I just can't. So 300 pages is the ideal length for a book. Man, oh man, wouldn't that be amazing if all books were 300 pages? I would get through so many more books. Sometimes I do think I like longer books because I get more time to delve into the character and the world, and especially fantasy. I think 300 pages for like a thriller or a romance or even contemporary potentially, that might be more appropriate for me and more of what I enjoy, but 300 pages for a fantasy book, it could potentially leave me wanting more. And that's a huge reason why I don't love novellas, because I just don't feel like I have enough time. So maybe 300 pages is the ideal length for other books outside of fantasy, but maybe not for fantasy, for me at least. Mistborn: The Final Empire isn't beginner adult fantasy. It's just YA fantasy. The ballrooms and dresses are the most intricately described aspects of the novel, second only to the magic system. Oh, Vin is still recovering from being severely injured and struggles to walk up a staircase? Of course she still dances well. Why wouldn't she? are going off on this book. She's too busy living her best dream with that cute, emotionally distant, damaged edgelord boy she can fix. You just went off. You had a bone to pick and you went off on Mistborn. That's hilarious. Okay, so this is definitely an unpopular opinion because oh my gosh, I did a video years ago at this point, and it was like best YA fantasy for older readers. And I had included Mistborn in that video and said, you know, I've seen Mistborn shelved in both places, adult fantasy and young adult, and I can see how it could appeal to both age ranges. And I got so many comments from so many angry people saying absolutely not, Mistborn is not young adult. And like so many people were so upset that I mentioned Mistborn in that video. Oh my Lord. Even with the caveat that I was like, yes, I understand this is adult fantasy, but it's also can be considered young adult. So I definitely think this is an unpopular opinion, and a lot of people would get very bothered by Mistborn being categorized as young adult. I agree with you that Mistborn can read like a YA fantasy can. I think that a lot of what Mistborn has, especially in that first book, can appeal to the young adult demographic or can appeal to people who enjoy reading young adult. So I don't disagree. I think it's very funny how you had a bone to pick with Vin with the dances and the ball gowns. But I agree. I do think that the rest of the series, Well of Ascension and Hero of Ages, I think that feels more adult fantasy than the first book does. But I do still think Mistborn belongs in adult fantasy. Like if I were to put it in one or the other, I would put it in adult. But I don't disagree that I think it can be enjoyed by young adult readers. So so I may not agree with like all of your comment, but I can see where you're coming from here. I like to dog-ear pages, break and bend the spines, and rough up books while I read them. I don't mind breaking spines, especially the oh my gosh, these ones, the UK paperbacks. How tightly bound they are, it's like almost impossible not to break the spines on these. So I've broken, you can't really tell on this one, but I've broken almost all of my UK paperbacks. I've broken their spines. I like kind of the worn look. I like when a book looks like it's been read and looks like it's been loved. It would be kind of weird if like every book was in the most pristine condition. It's like, have you read all of those? But I also understand wanting to keep your books in pristine condition. So this doesn't bother me that much. And I used to dog-ear pages. I do have a ton of bookmarks now. Oh my gosh, I have so many bookmarks and they're lying all over the place. So I don't have to dog-ear pages, but I used to travel a ton for work and I used to dog-ear pages all the time. So yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree, or I'm not bothered by people who do this. I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion, but as many people seem to hate them, I will say that I love books with adaptation covers. I'm not entirely sure why, but I do. So much so that if a book I like has been adapted, I'll look for a copy with the adaptation art. Wow, this is definitely unpopular. I think everyone I've seen talk about those adaptation covers has not liked them. I think that's great that you do like them. They're probably a little bit easier to find on like used bookstores and stuff because I know so many people who don't like them. I personally don't like them. I personally prefer original covers over the adaptation covers, unless there's something like the A Song of Ice and Fire, which I think this is technically an adaptation cover, but it doesn't look like it. I really like the look of those. So it depends, I guess. There might be exceptions to this, but no, I think that's definitely unpopular. Daniel Abraham is the best fantasy author out there. Okay, well, I haven't read any Daniel Abraham, but I would love to. So I will come back to you and let you know what I think once I read some Daniel Abraham. I really would like to read Age of Ash, and I would really like to read the entire Long Price Quartet series. So not a Holly Black fan. Read Tithe. Forgot how to read that word for a second. Read Tithe and hated it, but figured I'd give the Cruel Prince series a try because it was so popular. Didn't care for that series either. Won't pick up anything else from her. I haven't read any Holly Black, so I can't really react to this one. I do want to read the Cruel Prince series. That is one I would like to prioritize because of how popular it is. So I can let you know once I read that series if I disagree or agree. So, I'm sorry I haven't read any. The Way of Kings is the best Stormlight book. I almost agree. I love The Way of Kings. I think I like Rhythm of War just like a tad bit more. My opinion changes based on the day and the mood I'm in, which is my favorite, Way of Kings or Rhythm of War. But I love Way of Kings. I actually like it more than Words of Radiance and Oathbringer. So I almost agree with you there. TBRs are boring, and I don't care about the hype of books people have not read. Just give me a wrap-up. So I actually, from a viewer perspective, as someone who watches a lot of BookTube, I do agree with you. I prefer watching people's wrap-ups over TBRs. I do TBRs on my channel because the views tell me that people enjoy them. So I feel like a lot of people probably feel the same way, but a lot of people also seem to watch TBRs. So that tells me that some people enjoy them. So I'm going to keep doing them. I like giving myself a TBR. If I didn't like giving myself a TBR, I would not do TBR videos. I like having TBRs. I like having planned content and planned lists of stuff. That's just my personality, but I hear you. As a viewer, I also prefer wrap-ups. People who dislike nearly every book they read are kind of annoying. Like, we get it. You're a hater. And if everything is so boring and riddled with plot holes and boring characters, you should just write your own book. And if you know you don't like a certain trope, genre, or author, then just stop reading them. I know we don't always know exactly what's in every book, but I feel like a lot of the things people point out are things that you could find out with a little digging. I don't really follow anyone who does this, like who dislikes just every book they pick up. I think if people are like genuine, like they just genuinely like just have a bad reading month and just don't like the books that they picked up, like it might have just been a bad reading month. And I do think that there's something to, like, I've noticed for myself, I used to, when I first started getting back into reading after high school and college and all that, I used to just give out 5 stars so easily. I just was like, oh yeah, loved this, loved that, loved this. And as I started reading more and more, I got a little bit pickier with what I was loving in books and got a little bit pickier with my ratings. So I've just noticed as I've become like more and more of a reader, and as I've read more and more books, I've just noticed myself becoming a little bit pickier with some of the things, and especially like fantasy. That's like my most read genre for sure. I now really can tell what I do and don't like in fantasy, versus before, I think I was just, you know, so new to the genre that everything kind of seemed so fresh and new, and it's like, yeah, 5 stars. So I think it changed, like, I think it changes a little bit when you start just reading so much from a certain genre or just reading so much in general. You become a little bit pickier. So that might be some of it, but I don't really follow anyone who like hates everything that they read. But I can see how, like, from a viewer perspective, if someone is like has a wrap up where they're just like everything sucks, then that would be a little like disheartening, because you also want to see people like get really passionate about what they read and find stuff that they love. But yeah, and I also think that depending on the booktuber, like sometimes I watch booktubers whose tastes are completely different than mine, and if they hate a book, I'm like, ooh, I need to pick up that book. Because if they hate it, I'm like, oh, I would probably love it then. So I think sometimes it can be just as helpful to see what people hate, because if I know that booktuber's taste, then I know, hey, maybe it's something I would like. So I think reviews are just so helpful, no matter if you hate a book or love a book. They can be so helpful either way to viewers. Novellas are the best form of storytelling. I see a lot of people agree with you. I wish I loved novellas. I personally don't love novellas. I read one that I loved, which was Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark. Love that one. But everything else I've read that is a novella, it's just always left me wanting more. And I noticed someone mentioned the Wayward Children series. I've tried that series and it just did not work for me at all. So I think I wish I loved novellas. And I think that that's amazing that you love them. There may be exceptions of novellas I haven't read yet that are amazing. So if you have any recommendations, let me know. But yeah, unfortunately, I have not read any novellas besides Ring Shout that have made me think it is the best form of storytelling. Shallan is a more interesting and engaging protagonist than Kaladin. No. Absolutely not. No, actually, you know what? I can see why you would say this, because I think Kaladin's character is a little bit more straightforward. I love Kaladin. I think I like Kaladin's character more than I like Shallan's character, but I think that Shallan does have a little bit more going on. Like, I do think that her kind of internal struggle can be at times a lot more complex than maybe what Kaladin's going through. Like, she's got a lot going on. So I can see how you would think she's more interesting and engaging than Kaladin, but I prefer Kaladin for sure. I love Kaladin so much. I avoid watching videos where creators hold up a bunch of books with sprayed edges in the thumbnail. All of the special editions are the same bunch of overhyped YA-ish romancy fantasy books. Ooh, okay. I'm gonna hide my sprayed edges. So, I mean, I do get some of the fantasy books in these subscription boxes, so this might be a little bit personal to me. That's okay. So, I mean, I get it. If everyone's getting those same books and those same editions, I can see how it would get very exhausting as a viewer to continuously watch people hauling the same books, people talking about the same books. That would get very irritating. I totally get it. I partake in it because I genuinely love the editions and I'm always interested in the books. If I'm not, I skip the books. There are several that I've skipped that actually have sounded a little more like fantasy romance, and that's just not my personal favorite genre. Not to fault anyone who's loves fantasy romance. I think it's fantastic that a lot of people love fantasy romance. I also do agree that some of these subscription boxes that do say that they are adult books sometimes lean into what could be considered more young adult books. Like, I've gotten several that have read younger than I would expect an adult fantasy book to read. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing because sometimes I've really enjoyed that. Sometimes it's nice to have a book that reads a little bit more like a young adult book in between all of like the denser adult fantasy books that I read. So I can totally understand your comment here. I definitely don't blame you if that gets irritating to you. I can totally see why. There's more to your comment, so let me keep reading. Also, people seem to haul tons of these book boxes, but people barely read them, and when they do, the books are usually underwhelming. I think it's a waste of money. That's fair. Yeah, I think that's fair. Definitely don't subscribe if you think it's a waste of money. I do plan on reading all of the books that I receive from the book boxes. I've seen quite a few creators start to prioritize, like they do reading vlogs of like reading all of my subscription books or something like that, which I think is always fun to see if people really do end up enjoying the books that they do receive in these boxes. I personally, again, like spending my money on the beautiful editions. That's just my personal preference. That's what I love. And I don't fault anyone who also loves to spend their money on the pretty editions. And I don't fault anyone who thinks it's a waste of money. I get it. Especially if the books that come in those boxes never seem to interest you. I get that. So yeah, I mean, I understand your comment for sure, even though I partake in what's irritating you. I'm sorry. Let me try to get through some more because we're almost at 30 minutes of filming and I have not gotten through all of the comments. I'm gonna try to go more rapid fire. With some exceptions, BookTok is the absolute worst place for good book recommendations. Oh, wow. Unless you love smut romance, good luck finding a good fantasy, literary fiction, nonfiction creator on there. They're also responsible for hyping up terrible books and mediocre writers. Okay, wow. Woo-hoo. Someone has a bone to pick with BookTok. Dang. Okay, so again, I'm not on BookTok like I mentioned last video, so I do not know if this is true or not. I do have a friend who is one of my best friends in my, like, outside of BookTube life, who has a BookTok channel, who reads not fantasy romance or not romance at all. And she loves, like, literary fiction, contemporary fiction, historical fiction, nonfiction, everything under the sun that's not fantasy, not romance. And I'm going to recommend her BookTok channel. Do you call them channels? I'm going to recommend her down below. Her username is Storytime with Shelbs. So if you're looking for a great BookTok creator who does read those types of books that you mentioned, check her out. She's fantastic. So I know that there are creators out there who do talk about other books outside of fantasy and romance and all of that. And I don't know how, like, the BookTok algorithm works. It sounds like a lot of people just get recommended the same kind of, like, creators. Like, once you have that niche of creators, the fantasy romance or romance in general niche of creators recommended to you, it sounds like the algorithm makes it hard to find other stuff outside of that. I don't know. Again, I'm not on BookTok, so I don't know how any of this works, but that's what I'm hearing a lot of. So maybe it's really hard to find other creators because of, like, the nature of the algorithm on BookTok. I have no idea. But I know from my one friend that there are some creators out there, and I have heard other people talk about that they've found other recommendations, but maybe it's just, like, much harder to find. I don't know. I have no idea. So if anybody has any other good recommendations for BookTokers, is that what you call them? BookTokers. Anyone has any good recommendations that aren't fantasy romance or romance creators on BookTok, leave those comments down below. Maybe we can all find some new creators that way. I dislike the Lord of the Rings books a lot. I think they are incredibly boring. Okay, that's fair. I disagree. I love Lord of the Rings, but that's fair. I get it. I can see why the writing style wouldn't be for everyone. I get it. Sarah J. Maas books are massively overrated and not worth the time and effort. There, I said it. A lot of people feel that way. I feel so many. And the next one is ACOTAR is way overrated. Couldn't even finish the first book. I'm going to offend most people with this one. Throne of Glass is just sloppy. And then ACOTAR is overhyped. Let's see, I've got some other ones. ACOTAR was so bad. I kept hoping the MC would get killed. So you're not alone, basically, is what I'm trying to tell you. A lot of people hate Sarah J. Maas and hate ACOTAR and Throne of Glass. So I don't know if that is much of an unpopular opinion anymore. Brandon Sanderson is overrated. Yeah, I think a lot of people also agree with you. Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson is the worst Cosmere novel. Wow, ouch. Overall, the Mistborn trilogy is overrated. A lot of people have mentioned Brandon Sanderson in this thread, I think. Brandon Sanderson isn't really that good of a writer. Warbreaker is just meh. Brandon Sanderson or Sarah J. Maas are way too overhyped for the mediocre quality of their books. So yeah, you are not alone. All of the folks who do not like Sarah J. Maas, who do not like Brandon Sanderson, who call them overrated, you are not alone. You have a lot of other people who are definitely on your side in this chain, actually. So yes, I feel like that is one that I could just kind of react to overall. I like Sarah J. Maas books. I love Brandon Sanderson books, but I can understand why you wouldn't like them. And they are so hyped. So many people love them. So of course you're going to get people who also don't. So that is fair. And that is why reading is so wonderful, because it would be really, really boring if we all loved the same books and authors and no one had any differing opinions. It would be an extremely boring world. So I'm glad that we can all still be friends while having opposite opinions. All right, let me see if I can find one other one to chat through. All right. Here are my unpopular opinions. Leather-bound books are ugly. You know what? I don't necessarily totally agree. I don't think that they're ugly, but I don't think that they are beautiful enough to warrant the extremely high price tags. I don't buy the very, very fancy leather-bound editions of books for that exact reason. I actually prefer original artwork or like the book box editions over special leather-bound editions. And it goes with, the same thing goes with like the Kickstarter editions that are being put out by a lot of self-published authors, or Brandon Sanderson's leather-bound editions. Like, I just cannot, for me, like, swallow the price for that edition, especially since I just prefer like artwork on covers over leather-bound editions. So I don't necessarily think they're ugly, but I also don't think they are worth the price of what they usually are. That being said, if people do collect leather-bound editions and they have them all lined up, they look beautiful on shelves, and I don't fault people for spending that amount of money on books that they love, or a leather-bound edition that they love. I mean, I would do it for a beautiful edition that I love. I would splurge every now and then, but I personally kind of agree with you that they're not my favorite. We'll say that. Numbered special editions are dumb and pointless. On that note, special editions that cost $200 are a shameless money grab. Agree with you on numbered. I don't know why it's so special to get a numbered edition. I don't care at all if my edition is numbered or not. Special editions that cost $200 or more, I can't pay that amount of money for a book. I just can't. But if someone does, that's amazing. And if that's what makes you happy, if that is what you want to spend your money on, you go for it. I think that's awesome. So I just because me personally, I don't feel like I can spend $200 on a special edition, do not feel bad if that is something that you can do and that you'd like to do. I think it's amazing, and your bookshelves are probably absolutely beautiful, and I would love to come and see them. But I also just, I can't swallow that price. I just can't. Oh, romantic subplots elevate a book so much, but only if they are written well. Agreed. I very often find that the romantic subplots that I have read are not written well, and that is why so many times romance in my fantasy books just does not work for me so great. But when it is written well, I love it. I can think of like a couple that are standouts for me. Like the romance in Black Sun, love it so much. Love it so much. There are a couple exceptions of like romantic subplots in fantasy that I absolutely love. But yes, they have to be written well. They have to be written well. Okay, this was a long video, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop it here. Again, I wasn't able to get to every single one, but I feel like I got to a lot this time. So yes, if you all want to see more, I could totally do a part 3, but I feel like I got through a ton. So let me know in the comments down below, what did you think of the unpopular opinions? Do you have any more unpopular opinions that you just need to get off your chest? Just let it all out. Maybe if you all had a similar opinion as one of these other opinions that I mentioned, you don't feel so alone now. So let me know in the comments down below, what did you think? And thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye!